And kudos, that was a great presentation. I love coming to these and learning stuff. So ironically, we're going to go from the hyper local to the 1 to million scale and beyond here. So we're going to sort of flip that up on its head here. But this session of cartography, there's such a breadth and depth to it. So this will be a little bit different flavor. It's great to see 40, 50 people here attending today. I think the first WLIA I attended, I had brown hair, so it was a long time ago. But I recognize a few names as I scrolled through the list. It's great to see folks coming out, and even though it's crazy cold outside, this is a great way to connect. So Emma, thank you for participating. Emma is a critical piece of our cartographic production here. She has sort of moved into several roles over the last 2 years or so, just showing her ability here. So really, she's going to get into the meat and potatoes of this today in terms of some of the particulars around cartography. So it's a pleasure to talk to you guys. I want to comment, first and foremost, if I can get my slides to advance, there we go. The response to this, the small talk question, what do you do for a living? I used to, for many years, say, I make maps, right? It was sort of the easy thing to say. The reality is, and I'd ask any of you to share in the chat here of what do you say? How do you respond? I think for many years, though, the reality here at Continental Mapping has been we didn't really make maps. We made data, right? We gave data to other people. We were geomatics professionals doing photogrammetry or terrestrial LiDAR scanning or 100 other things to help drive the creation of data. But the map making itself was done by many of you, government agencies, utilities, and so on and so forth. In the last handfuls of years, that's changed a good bit for us. And so that was really part of what we wanted to talk today is, the production of high-end cartographic work. There for a time there was sort of paper maps. Who's ever going to make another paper map, right? And some of our military work. I had a guy tell me, there's, if I have some fancy piece of technology and a bullet puts a hole in it, I got a piece of junk that doesn't work anymore. But if I got a piece of paper that's got a hole in it, I got a map with a hole in it, and I'm still good to go. So there's still reasons to have paper maps around. And so the production here that we're going to talk about is really to getting to that end, even though some of the deliveries are, in fact, digital in their nature. So just very briefly on us, I would comment in the center there, GIS Inc was acquired by us just 2 weeks ago. And so as a sponsor of WLIA, we're happy to have that sort of component in supporting the organization here. We have been around since 1999, Wisconsin-based company. I'm in Sun Prairie, is where our corporate headquarters is. But with the acquisition of GIS Inc and a company called TSG Solutions, which is out in California, we're now 360 some people. So we've grown a lot. We still employ the vast majority of those folks are in the state of Wisconsin. So lots of people who've come from the university systems and so forth. So we're excited and happy to be a strong player in the state of Wisconsin and supporting all the kinds of things that happen here. You get a little bit of a flavor of sort of the client base and technologies and things that we do. But really, I wanted to step back and talk about the client, the end client here that is driving all of this cartographic work we're talking about today. The National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, or NGA, is our organization there. Some may recall the Defense Mapping Agency was their predecessor name, but this is essentially the geospatial engine for all Department of Defense. I've shown there sort of the primary and secondary missions of the NGA. Certainly it's to collect, analyze, and distribute geospatial intelligence, or GeoInt, across the globe. So they are mapping the entire world. They co-share those efforts with lots of other nations. I would comment that the data that gets built by the NGA certainly goes into the cockpit of a fighter jet, or the mission control inside of a ship, et cetera. But much of it, in terms of its supporting mission, goes to supporting natural and man-made disasters, security planning, and so forth, be it supporting COVID issues across the world, hurricanes, typhoons, the Ebola breakout, and on down the line. So the data they build ends up in lots of different civil agencies. And this work occurs both in two campuses. We work at both, although Emma's joining us from St. Louis in our St. Louis office, and we do a lot of liaisoning with the St. Louis office there. That's where the Defense Mapping Agency was first started. So there's a sizable campus there. If you're anywhere down near the Arch in St. Louis, then you're pretty darn close to the new NGA East campus there. In the middle of constructing that, probably made quite a bit of progress. I haven't been down to St. Louis in a while because we don't travel very much, but that's a quick synopsis of the end client. So it's just an absolute monster of an agency doing mapping across the globe. Within the NGA then is a family of contracts called Janus. And so all the work we're talking about here comes from that. So this is several $1 billion of expenditures by the NGA over a 10-year period to produce authoritative original geospatial data, as well as update mapping. And you see the family of contracts there, the Janus Geography, Janus Aero, et cetera. Continental Mapping is a prime contract holder on Janus aeronautical features. So that is the mapping of airports. So you see over 28,000 airports we've mapped across the globe. Now this is several hours of satellite-based mapping per airport. This is not high accuracy mapping, but it's measuring runways and buildings and construction changes and things like that. You see millions worth of vertical obstructions. So measuring shadows on vertical objects to define what might be in the flight patterns of planes coming and going into all these different airports. The geomatics elevation, so that's topographic mapping, classified work. We are a prime contractor there as well. But the work we're talking about today really falls under Janus Geography. So Janus Geography is a family of contracts. There's, I think, maybe 10 or 12 prime contract holders. And so we are producing the vast majority of the cartographic work for NGA within this contract vehicle underneath that specific contract. But here's a quick sample of some of the vertical obstruction mapping. So within certain geographies or perimeters of airports, some of these sort of squiggly lines are flight training lines. So they're doing military training. So they're flying at levels that are sort of outside of the typical FAA restraints. And so we're mapping amongst all those different sort of geographies just in the US alone. And then just a simple sense of the sort of the cartographic layers that are produced here are very comprehensive, very rich. And so Emma's going to walk us through the sort of all the steps that go into the cartographic production. I would say just briefly as to sort of tee that up is, we want to talk about some of the tools and workflows that we use for the production efforts, and then sort of help translate that, because obviously the rigor here is very comprehensive given its NGA, and try to help you a sense of what can I cherry pick out of that and take home with me. We want to emphasize the value of specifications and consistency. We have, I'm not sure the number, whether it's 8, 10, 12 people, 20 people, it sort of varies depending on how much work we're doing, but there's quite a crew working on these things. And so consistency and standardization is critical. We'll talk briefly about some custom font development that we recently finished here for them. That's a sort of a unique piece of how this cartographic work gets done, and then ultimately give you some sort of take-home recommendations. So with that context, I'll pass it to Emma.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Just to reintroduce myself again, I'm Emma. I'm one of the senior analysts on our Carto projects here at CMC, and hopefully I can give you a big enough picture of what's happening with our Carto projects and give you some advice to take home. Just kind of a brief overview to get started. So we focus mainly on aeronautical charts for NGA. So we've focused on 5 different scales so far across the different contracts we've worked. Starting with the smallest scale we worked is JOGS, so Joint Operations Graphics. It's a 1 to 250K scale, so it's fairly small considering the other charts we've worked on. By a variety of ground and air units throughout our military branches. These are our most I say classified, air quotes, charts. They're limited distribution, so you do have to have, you know, the correct clearance, the right request forms to get those. All of the other charts we worked on are technically open source, so anyone can request those. Moving up in size, we get to TPCs. Our most common size, I would say, for charts is a 1 to 500K. These are mainly used by the FAA, low to medium altitude aircraft, for a variety of planning, mapping out different pathways, things like that. Kind of in tandem with the TPCs, you have its slightly larger, you know, brother chart, the ONCs. So 1 to 1 million scale, navigational film strips, cockpit visual displays, all of that is kind of added in. Then you get to our 2 largest scales. So the JNCs are jet navigation charts. So really high altitude strategic aircraft, again, used by the FAA. There's a lot of different ocean routes and waypoints mapped on those as well. So you're adding in an additional layer of information, you know, on top of all of our base map. And then the largest scale, these giant beasts of charts, are the GNCs. So they're global navigation and planning charts. Global is very accurate. It's a 1 to 5 million scale chart for long range, high speed aircraft, military planning over large scale theaters. One of the GNCs we mapped spanned from, you know, the East Coast of the United States, I believe, all the way to Romania in Eastern Europe. So they're huge, huge charts. So we have quite a bit of skill sets at all different levels, but definitely not quite the hyper local level as the previous presentation. There we go. If you want to go to the next slide. This one is just a sampling of all of the different sources that we're using on any given chart at any time. We have our base topographic features, so your roads, rails, facilities, etc. Building on top of that, you know, we're focusing on aeronautical charts. So the aeronautic data is super, super important for us. We pull from a couple different sources. So you have ACES for all of our airfields, airspaces. All of our vertical obstructions are from the Web DBOF platform. So we have a couple different things on that side. You know, elevation, we're pulling from one global repository. So we have the same cohesive relief throughout all of our charts. We're producing, I believe, around 300 charts this contract, and a lot of them are neighboring to each other. So we want to keep that same sort of relief pattern. We don't want any sort of inconsistencies, things not looking quite right. And then the last group, your ancillary content, is kind of, I would say, the largest group, just because it's all of the other little nitpicky things that don't quite fall under any of the other larger global databases. So your geonames, proper names for mountains, rivers, things like that. Your international boundaries, navigation lights. I had one other one that I wanted to mention, but I can't remember. But it's a bunch of extra little tidbits that we can add into our actual production databases. So at any given time, any chart is working with 10 types of data that we're having to bring together and condition. Next slide. So this one kind of overviews our full cartographic production workflow. So like Paul mentioned, he didn't quite know how many people we had on the Carto project currently. It's 50, which is a very, very large project scale. It's something CMC's never quite worked with before. So we're splitting people up between all of these different steps, training them in kind of localized areas and building up their experience that way, just because it would take months upon months to train everyone in the full process, just because it is so detailed since we're working for NGA. But starting at the beginning, we start with all of our source data. We're creating all of our AOIs, harvesting any of the extra data like aeronautic data that we're pulling from NGA databases, different source packages we're getting from Prime. So the original topographic data that they've collected during data conditioning, all of that is being sourced. And then you move on to data prep. So this is combining all of those sources into one giant production database, creating the different templates we're using to edit the data, pre-processing global data, populating all the databases, doing a full-scale review of the data at this point. Then we get into this blue section, which is what we call the finishing stages. We're taking all of the data, we're thinning it even further if necessary. So sometimes when they collect roads, they're collecting them too close together for our scale that we're working at. We can come in, thin those out a little further, just to declutter the map, make it a little bit more legible, usable for the end product. Then you move on to finishing. By and large, like the largest part of our entire production process, it's truly a full scale review of the data, all of the information in your charts. You're displacing any features that are overlapping, deconflicting text so you can read it, adding any additional annotations. It's a really beefy portion of the production process that we're working on. So it takes up, by and large, the largest amount of time. Moving into our internal quality assessment. So since we are producing an actual product for NGA, we have a minimum of 2 rounds of internal QC for us. So we're doing, again, a full review of the data, a visual inspection of the product, making sure everything looks okay, you can read everything. Is there some better placement to apply? If we're missing data, we catch it then as well. And then our second QC round is solely reserved for critical data checks. So since we're doing aeronautical charts, we're verifying all of our airports, all of our runways, vertical obstructions, all of those really specific features that are safety of navigation issues. We're double checking those, again, before we even send it to the prime or NGA for their reworks in QC. So once we produce a product, we deliver it to the prime and NGA. They then go through their own external QC and rework process. So we're going through, I think by the time a chart's done, typically 5 rounds of quality assessment. It's a really intensive process. And as we'll kind of get into it, there's a lot of specifications we have to apply. But we are creating a physical product. It needs to be pretty much perfect. So it's quite intensive, but it's just an overview of how our whole production process kind of breaks down. Next slide, yes. So kind of building off of that workflow, the finishing and presentation, we do have a highly automated data prep and chart setup process at this point. By the time data prep's done, running, I believe, 15 to 20 separate tools that we built. Here at CMC, we have a final production database that has all of those different data sources loaded, everything's symbolized correctly. Those features we don't have to show at various chart scales are turned off. Everything's been annotated. It truly is just a grab and go, there we go, package that our finishers can just take and finish the entire product with. But since it's so much data coming in together, we do have some major focus areas. So the refinement and automated, semi-automated feature thinning, feature deconfliction, and text deconfliction. So we are working on some tools to develop to kind of automate these feature displacements and deconfliction. So we're taking out some of the guesswork. We can use different def queries in Esri's ArcMap suite to provide rankings for the different data, the different annotations, so we can pre-thin some of those things out so we don't have to spend as much time on the actual finishing process. And then kind of building off of that even more, we do have standardized legends and marginalia. This is a government product. We can't really, customize it how we would like it. There's a lot of really specific specifications that we have to follow, and the legend is just a part of that as well. So if we go to the next slide, so this is just an example on the left. We have our original production database and how it represents in ArcMap from that data prep stage, and then on the right, we have an end product. So a lot of finishing personal attention has been paid to this. There we go. Talking too fast. We'll slow down. that, we're looking at different text deconflictions. We've resized some of the text in here. We've provided really clear areas to view all of that aeronautic data. It's that darker blue color we're seeing. We can read all of those annotations, see what features they're associated with really clearly. We've turned off some annotations that aren't really adding to the whole chart. We're doing this on a chart-wide basis. So these are giant 22 by 30 inch pieces of paper when they're printed. So there's quite a bit of map area we're having to cover each chart. If we go to the next slide, yeah, this is just another example of our standardized margin. This is just 2 little sections of it. On the right, left. You would think I would know my directions better being a cartographer. On the left, we have the arrow section of our legend. So all of those aeronautic features again, different examples of how they can be represented throughout the chart, what those representations are, the type of annotation associated with them, what those mean. All of that is standard. We're not having to change that on a chart by chart basis. I would say, in that screenshot, the only thing we're really having to update is the populated place list. So the different cities listed there typically change based on the region that your chart's in, what you're focusing on. So we're not editing too much there. Getting into our actual specifications, with a wide variety of products, all across the globe, specifications become really, really important, especially since we're also producing maps for a government agency. So we have 2 different DPSs we use that outline our different specifications. Both of them are 700 plus pages of guidance and guidelines on how to place annotation, what we're showing, the different symbology we can use. They're truly, truly hefty documents, to the point where, I don't think anyone, CMC or NGA, has ever fully read the document because it's so large. But there's a lot going into it. So we try to focus on, the few major areas, so that aeronautical information, safety of navigation, and all the legibility specifications that get kind of worked into that as well. If we go to the next slide. This is my favorite slide. I helped lead this project, but part of the specifications gets so nitpicky to, we're restricted to what specific fonts we can use when creating these products. So because of that, it led to this need for a universal font for NGA to apply to all of its charts at specific scales. So CMC helped create this font. We expanded the character selection, so the physical letters, from 140 to about 560. We've tested it on multiple platforms and converting data from different sources, and every character translates correctly. So all of those diacritics, so your accents, your macrons, your umlauts, none of those get dropped. You're still keeping the integrity of those names you're transferring. So it was really exciting project for me, at least. You might not find fonts exciting, but it was a huge undertaking because this is going to be rolled out onto about 6 different scales of charts. So it had a very, very intensive QC process for this alone. So it took about 6 months to even produce a font. And then we went through another, maybe a couple months of QC and fixes on top of that. So it's just an example of the font we were building, the different types of diacritics that we build off of. It needs to be shown in italic, bold, regular. All of those need to translate correctly, and everything looks the same. The actual character spacing between the letters needs uniform. It was a very extensive process, but we're really happy with the product, and NGA is really happy, and they're going to roll it out in about a month or 2, which is really exciting. Getting into, I keep talking about our final product and like what it is. What that product is a print press ready PDF. So what that means is it's printing 2 specific color plates. So we have, specific colors we're using that's part of the specifications, but NGA can literally screen print these products onto various types of materials. So it has to be a very, very specific color mapping scheme. The resolution has to be the same. It's layered, so you can pull out those different spot heights or spot plates. It's geo-referenced. It's truly a pretty cool product. It's set up in the way kind of like an MXD. You can turn layers on and off as you go through it to verify things. But the color management really comes into play here and all the color theory behind it. In that graphic, you can see, we have multiple colors on the left side that are all be mapped to, a specific set of colors on the right, with different various tints and overprints applied to make a usable end product. Paul kind of wants to share this with me, but different recommendations to kind of take away from this. I know I threw a lot of information at you really quickly. I do talk quite fast, so I apologize if you miss something, but plan for conditioning and conflation. I don't think I've ever seen a map that's only pulling from one source alone. You're probably having to compile a couple different sources together, take the time, condition that, put it together correctly. It's going to solve you a lot of issues when you finally get to that finishing process and annotating everything, making it look good. It's going to really build a nice foundation for you. Specifications, I know I keep talking about them. They are a very necessary part of it for uniformity and ease of production. So Paul touched on this a little bit. We're mapping the entire globe at various different scales. We have to have a set standard of rules that we're following, because charts in the Middle East look nothing like charts on Borneo. But we can still apply some of the same different basic rules to follow in those different areas, despite the topology being different. Quality control is very, very necessary. We're having to reiterate this to our new analysts quite a bit. It is a mandatory part of our production process. It might not be on other projects that are producing things quite quickly. We have to have 2 rounds of QC before we even think about submitting a chart to a prime or NGA. So think about what's going to go into that. Are you reviewing things in an MXD, in ArcMap? Are you reviewing them on a PDF level like we are? Different things can kind of go into that. And this is just my last tip. Review as many types of cartographic products as possible. See what works and what doesn't. I'm much more critical of maps now than I ever was before, despite me, loving maps my entire life. I'll even watch the news and I'm like, why did they choose that color? It looks so wrong. Really, any kind of exposure you can get is going to help you become a better cartographer and produce better products. Just because you see what works, what to focus on, even the specific font you're using can be really influence your project and product and how the end user uses it. I don't know if Paul wants to build off of any of those. But
great, Emma. I think when you're asked, what do you do for a living, you can legitimately say you make maps. So I'm glad to see that. I appreciate everybody's time. That was quite a bit of information there, but I know we're at the bottom of the hour. And so Grace, will leave it to you if there's a question or two possibly. If not, thank you.
Great, thank you so much. It doesn't look like we have any questions in the chat, but I personally have one. I found the fact that you created a universal font particularly interesting. Can you go over a little bit what application you used to build that, just real quickly?
Yeah, so it's a mixture of Adobe. I believe we used High Logic Font Creator was the specific font creation software we used. And then we used all of our ArcMap products as well for different QC levels. So since these are being used on NGA products, we had to test them on fake NGA products. So we kind of built all of the artwork for the font in Adobe, and then used the actual font creator software to make sure the letters were sized correctly, the spacing between the characters was set up. Yeah, and I believe that was High Logic Font Creator was the specific program we used.
Cool. Super interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I'm glad someone else finds fonts interesting.
I do.